The moment my father handed my sister a check for $35,000 at our family brunch, using the money he had promised for my wedding, I knew everything I believed about family loyalty was about to shatter forever. My name is Emma Rodriguez, and I had spent 28 years being the reliable daughter who never asked for anything, who celebrated everyone else's milestones while quietly saving for my own dreams, who believed that patience and selflessness would eventually be rewarded with the support I had always given others. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The restaurant buzzed with the comfortable noise of families enjoying Sunday brunch, clinking silverware against porcelain plates, muffled conversations mixing with the gentle jazz playing overhead. I sat across from my father at Romano's Italian Bistro, the same restaurant where we had celebrated every major family milestone for the past 15 years. My engagement ring caught the morning light streaming through the stained glass windows, a simple but elegant solitaire that represented 18 months of careful planning and dreaming about the wedding that would mark the beginning of my life with David. My father, Robert Rodriguez, looked distinguished in his navy blazer, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled as always. At 54, he commanded respect in every room he entered, his success as a commercial real estate broker evident in his expensive watch and confident demeanor. He had built his career on handshake deals and personal relationships, often telling me that family connections were the foundation of all business success. The conversation had flowed naturally through updates about work, discussions of David's recent promotion at the engineering firm, and my father's enthusiasm about the upcoming merger that would expand his brokerage into 3 additional counties. We had reached the comfortable lull that often preceded important family discussions when he cleared his throat and reached into his jacket pocket. "Emma, sweetheart," he began, his voice carrying the tone he used when preparing to discuss serious matters. "I wanted to talk with you about something important. About your wedding fund. The wedding fund." Those words had sustained me through years of careful financial planning and delayed gratification. When I was 23 and newly graduated from college, my father had made a promise that had shaped every major decision I had made since. He would contribute $35,000 toward my wedding expenses when the time came, allowing me to have the celebration I had dreamed about since childhood without starting married life burdened by debt. That promise had influenced my choice to live with 2 roommates in a cramped apartment rather than renting my own place. It had motivated my decision to drive a 10-year-old Honda Civic instead of financing a newer car. It had guided my choice to pack lunches every day instead of eating out with colleagues, to shop at discount stores instead of department stores, to decline weekend trips and social events that would have strained my carefully maintained budget. Every sacrifice had felt worthwhile because it was building towards something beautiful and meaningful. The wedding fund represented more than money. It symbolized my father's investment in my happiness and his recognition that my dreams mattered as much as anyone else's in our family. "I've been looking forward to using that money to help create the perfect day for you and David," I replied, my voice carrying genuine gratitude for his generosity and foresight. "We've been working with the wedding planner, and $35,000 will cover the venue, photography, and catering for about 150 guests. Nothing extravagant, but everything we've dreamed about." David and I had spent countless evenings reviewing vendor proposals and making decisions that maximized value while honoring the budget constraints created by my father's generous contribution and our own modest savings. The venue we had selected was a restored historic mansion, with gardens that would provide a romantic backdrop for our ceremony and reception. The photographers specialized in natural, candid shots that captured genuine emotion rather than posed perfection. The caterer had impressed us with creative menu options that accommodated various dietary restrictions while maintaining elegant presentation. My father nodded thoughtfully, but something in his expression had shifted. The enthusiasm I expected to see when discussing my wedding plans was replaced by a carefully neutral expression that I recognized from his business negotiations. He was preparing to deliver news that would require careful management of my reaction. "Actually, Emma, that's what I wanted to discuss with you today. There's been a change in circumstances that affects how we need to approach the wedding funding." The words settled over our table like morning fog, obscuring the clarity I had maintained about my wedding timeline and budget planning. Change in circumstances. In my father's vocabulary, that phrase typically preceded explanations of why previous commitments would need to be modified or abandoned entirely. "What kind of change?" I asked, keeping my voice level despite the anxiety beginning to build in my chest. My father glanced around the restaurant, perhaps ensuring that our conversation would remain private, before leaning forward slightly and lowering his voice. "Your sister is going through a difficult time right now, as you know. The divorce proceedings have become more complicated and expensive than anyone anticipated. Victoria, my 30-year-old sister, who had married her college boyfriend 4 years ago in a ceremony that cost $60,000, funded entirely by our father's enthusiastic financial support. Victoria, who had never learned to manage money responsibly because our father had always provided whatever she needed whenever she needed it. Victoria, who had quit her marketing job 6 months after her wedding because her husband earned enough to support them both, only to discover that financial dependence became a weapon during marital conflict. The divorce had been brewing for 8 months, ever since Victoria discovered that her husband had been having an affair with a colleague. The emotional betrayal had been devastating, but the financial implications had been equally challenging. Victoria had no recent employment history, minimal personal savings, and legal expenses that mounted daily as her attorney fought to secure fair division of assets and adequate spousal support. "I understand that Victoria's situation is difficult," I said carefully, already sensing the direction our conversation was heading but hoping my intuition was wrong. "But what does that have to do with my wedding fund?" My father's expression softened with the sympathy he typically displayed when explaining why business deals fell through, despite everyone's best intentions. "Victoria's legal fees have exceeded what she can manage on her own, and the settlement negotiations are at a critical stage. Her attorney says the next 60 days will determine whether she receives fair compensation or walks away with almost nothing." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The restaurant noise seemed to fade into background silence as I processed the implications of his words. My wedding was scheduled for October, still 6 months away, providing ample time for final planning and vendor coordination. Victoria's legal crisis was immediate and, according to our father's assessment, more urgent than my ceremonial celebration. "How much does Victoria need?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. $35,000 would cover her remaining legal expenses and provide enough working capital for her to secure an apartment and transition back to independent living. There it was, the exact amount of my wedding fund, presented as the solution to my sister's crisis. I stared at my father across the table, searching his face for any indication that he understood the magnitude of what he was suggesting. The money that represented years of my sacrifice and months of wedding planning could disappear in service of Victoria's immediate needs. "Dad, that money has been earmarked for my wedding for 5 years. David and I have made all of our plans based on that budget. We've signed contracts with vendors, sent save-the-date cards to guests, chosen a dress that fits the budget you committed to supporting." My father nodded with apparent understanding, but his expression remained resolute. "I know this is disappointing, Emma. I know you were counting on that money. But Victoria is family, and she's in crisis. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the people we love." Sacrifices. The word stung, because I had been making sacrifices for years to ensure that my wedding would not create financial burden for anyone. I had sacrificed comfort, convenience, and countless small pleasures to live within a budget that accommodated both my contribution to wedding expenses and my father's promised support. Now I was being asked to make the ultimate sacrifice, abandoning the celebration I had planned in favor of supporting my sister's recovery from poor life choices. "What about a loan?" I suggested, grasping for alternatives that might address Victoria's needs without eliminating my wedding fund entirely. Could Victoria borrow against her settlement expectations? Could she find alternative legal representation that costs less? Could other family members contribute to help her through this crisis? My father shook his head with the finality of someone who had already considered and rejected all possible alternatives. "Victoria's situation is too uncertain for traditional lending. alternative attorneys might compromise her settlement outcome. Other family members don't have resources available for this kind of emergency support. The logic was convenient and complete, eliminating all possibilities except the one that required my sacrifice. I felt the familiar pattern of family dynamics asserting itself, the unspoken expectation that I would gracefully accept whatever decision had been made on my behalf, because I was the responsible one who could handle disappointment without creating conflict. "I need to think about this," I said, buying time to process the full implications of his proposal. "Of course," my father replied, though his tone suggested that thinking was a formality that would ultimately lead to the same conclusion he had already reached. "But Victoria's attorney needs an answer by Wednesday. The timing is unfortunately urgent." 3 days. I had 3 days to decide whether to sacrifice my wedding fund for my sister's divorce expenses. 3 days to explain to David that our carefully planned celebration might need to be dramatically scaled down or postponed. 3 days to determine whether my dreams mattered as much as everyone else's emergencies. The brunch concluded with strained pleasantries and promises to discuss the matter further after I had time to consider all factors. My father paid the check with his usual generous tip, kissed my cheek goodbye, and reminded me that family always came first in the Rodriguez household. I walked to my car in a daze, my mind racing through calculations and alternatives, while my heart processed the betrayal of having my most important celebration reduced to a negotiable expense. Driving home to the apartment I shared with David, I considered the years of careful planning and financial discipline that had led to this moment. The wedding fund had represented more than money. It had symbolized my father's recognition that my happiness deserved investment and support. The promise had validated my belief that patience and responsibility would eventually be rewarded with the same generosity my family had always shown to Victoria during her various crises and expensive whims. Now that promise was being reframed as selfishness, my wedding celebration positioned as luxury, while Victoria's legal expenses were presented as necessity. The shifting narrative felt both familiar and devastating. Another instance of my needs being redefined as wants while other family members' desires were classified as emergencies requiring immediate sacrifice from everyone else. David was reviewing architectural plans for a commercial project when I entered our apartment, his engineering precision evident in the careful measurements and detailed notes covering our dining table. He looked up with the smile that had first attracted me to him 3 years ago, his genuine warmth and unwavering support, providing the emotional stability that had enabled me to envision a future free from the constant accommodation and compromise that characterized my relationship with my family. "How was brunch with your father?" he asked, gathering his work materials to make space for our conversation. I sat across from him at the table where we had spent countless evenings planning our wedding, reviewing vendor proposals, and imagining the celebration that would mark the beginning of our married life. The weight of my father's proposal settled between us like an uninvited guest, demanding attention while threatening to disrupt the carefully constructed plans that had sustained us through months of preparation. "There's been a development," I began, choosing my words carefully to convey the seriousness of the situation without immediately revealing the full impact on our wedding plans. "Victoria's divorce has become more expensive than expected, and Dad is reconsidering how to allocate family resources to address the crisis." David's expression shifted from casual interest to focused concern, his engineering mind immediately beginning to analyze the problem and potential solutions. "How much more expensive? Are we talking about thousands of dollars or tens of thousands?" $35,000, I replied, watching his face as he processed the significance of that specific amount. "Your wedding fund?" he said quietly, his understanding immediate and complete. I nodded, unable to speak past the emotion building in my throat. David reached across the table and took my hands, his touch providing anchor against the storm of conflicting loyalties and impossible choices that my father had created with his Sunday morning proposal. "What do you want to do?" David asked, his question focusing on my preferences rather than family expectations or financial calculations. The question revealed how different my relationship with David was compared to my family dynamics. He asked what I wanted rather than telling me what I should do. He prioritized my feelings rather than explaining why other considerations were more important. He offered support for whatever decision I made rather than manipulating me toward predetermined conclusions. "I want to have the wedding we planned," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. I want to use the money my father promised for the celebration we've been dreaming about for 18 months. I want to believe that my happiness matters as much as Victoria's crisis, and that 5 years of careful planning and financial sacrifice shouldn't be dismissed as selfishness. David nodded with the certainty of someone whose love was not conditional on my willingness to sacrifice my dreams for other people's emergencies. Then that's what we'll do. We'll figure out how to make it work, with or without your father's contribution. His support provided clarity that had been missing from my conversation with my father. The choice was not between helping Victoria and being selfish. The choice was between continuing the pattern of accommodation that had defined my entire relationship with my family, or finally asserting that my dreams deserved the same respect and support that had always been lavished on my sister's wants and needs. The evening passed in careful discussion of alternatives and implications. We reviewed our wedding budget, identified areas where expenses could be reduced without eliminating elements that were most important to us, and calculated how much additional money we would need to save if my father redirected the wedding fund to Victoria's legal expenses. The numbers were challenging but manageable with careful planning and mutual commitment to our shared goal. More significantly, we discussed the relationship dynamics that had led to this crisis and the pattern of decision-making that treated my needs as negotiable while positioning Victoria's wants as family obligations. David's perspective, informed by his own family's approach to mutual support and individual responsibility, provided contrast that helped me understand how unusual and unhealthy my family's expectations had become. In my family, David explained while we reviewed vendor contracts and payment schedules, we help each other during genuine emergencies, but we don't sacrifice one person's important milestones for another person's poor planning. If my sister needed legal help, my parents would contribute what they could afford without eliminating promises they had made to other children. His family's approach to mutual support without manipulation provided a model for healthy relationships that honored both individual needs and collective responsibility. The contrast highlighted how my father's proposal required me to accept that my wedding was less important than Victoria's divorce, that my years of planning were less valuable than her immediate crisis, that my dreams could be sacrificed without consultation or compensation. That night, lying in bed next to David while he slept peacefully, I stared at the ceiling and processed the full implications of my father's Sunday morning proposal. The wedding fund represented more than financial support. It symbolized my family's investment in my happiness, and their recognition that my dreams deserved the same priority and respect accorded to Victoria's various wants and needs over the years. The proposal to redirect that money revealed how my family actually viewed my role and importance within their dynamic. I was the reliable one who could handle disappointment, the responsible daughter who would sacrifice gracefully for the greater good, the accommodating sister who would prioritize Victoria's immediate wants over my own carefully planned celebrations. The recognition was painful, but also liberating. Understanding the true nature of these relationships provided clarity about the choices I faced and the potential consequences of whatever decision I made. I could continue the pattern of accommodation and sacrifice that had defined my entire adult relationship with my family, or I could finally assert that my dreams mattered as much as anyone else's emergencies. The decision would require courage, but it would also require clarity about my own values and priorities. The question was not whether I could afford to lose my father's financial support for my wedding. The question was whether I could afford to continue living in relationships that required me to minimize my own importance in service of other people's convenience and immediate gratification. Monday morning would bring the need for concrete decisions and difficult conversations. The wedding fund crisis would force me to choose between family harmony and personal dignity, between accommodation and authenticity, between the familiar pattern of sacrifice and the unknown territory of self-advocacy. The weight of unspoken dreams had pressed down on me for years, the accumulation of deferred desires and minimized importance creating a burden that had become invisible through its constancy. Sunday's conversation with my father had finally made that weight visible and undeniable, forcing me to confront the choice between continuing to carry that burden or finally setting it down in favor of dreams that deserved to see the light of day. The moment of decision was approaching, and for the first time in my adult life, I was prepared to prioritize my own happiness over my family's expectations. The journey toward authenticity would begin with a single word: no. The question was whether I possessed the courage to speak that word, and accept the consequences that would inevitably follow. Monday morning arrived with the gray uncertainty of Pacific Northwest weather, rain pattering against the windows of our apartment, while I prepared for what would become one of the most significant days of my adult life. The coffee maker gurgled in the background as I reviewed the notes David and I had compiled the previous evening. Our careful analysis of wedding costs and alternative funding options spread across the kitchen counter like battle plans for an upcoming campaign. The weight of my father's ultimatum had settled into my bones overnight, creating an unfamiliar sensation of clarity mixed with determination. For the first time in my relationship with my family, I understood that accommodation would not preserve harmony but would instead establish a precedent that my dreams could be sacrificed whenever someone else's crisis demanded immediate attention. The recognition was both liberating and terrifying, opening possibilities I had never considered while requiring courage I was not certain I possessed. David had left early for a construction site inspection, kissing my forehead and reminding me that whatever decision I made would have his complete support. His unwavering confidence in my judgment provided stark contrast to my family's assumption that I would gracefully accept whatever arrangement served their collective convenience. The difference between conditional and unconditional support had never been more apparent or more significant for my understanding of healthy relationships. My phone buzzed with a text message from Victoria, the first direct communication we had shared since her divorce proceedings intensified 3 months earlier. The message was characteristically brief and self-focused. "Dad mentioned you might help with my legal expenses. I really appreciate you stepping up for family during this difficult time. I know you understand that my situation is more urgent than wedding planning right now." The presumption embedded in her message revealed how thoroughly my family had discussed and decided my role in Victoria's crisis without consulting me about my own priorities or preferences. The phrase "stepping up for family" reframed my potential sacrifice as moral obligation while simultaneously diminishing my wedding as mere planning, rather than the celebration of love and commitment that David and I had been anticipating for 18 months. I stared at the message for several minutes, recognizing the sophisticated manipulation tactics that had shaped our sibling relationship since childhood. Victoria had always possessed remarkable skill in presenting her wants as needs, while positioning my reluctance to sacrifice as evidence of selfishness or family disloyalty. The pattern had been so consistent and pervasive that I had internalized the belief that my role within the family was to provide support rather than receive it. The realization sparked something unexpected within me, a surge of anger that felt both foreign and empowering. I had spent decades accommodating Victoria's various crises, lending money that was never repaid, providing emotional support during her romantic disasters, celebrating her achievements while minimizing my own successes to avoid creating comparison or competition. The accumulated resentment of years of one-sided relationships crystallized into clarity about the choice I faced. Rather than responding immediately to Victoria's text message, I decided to conduct research that would inform my decision with concrete information rather than emotional manipulation. My first call went to Jennifer Walsh, a family law attorney whose daughter had been in my college sorority and who had provided informal legal advice during various family situations over the years. Jennifer listened carefully as I explained Victoria's divorce situation and the financial pressures that had prompted my father's proposal to redirect my wedding fund toward legal expenses. Her questions were precise and professional, focusing on the specifics of Victoria's case rather than the family dynamics that complicated the situation. $35,000 in legal fees suggests either extremely complex asset division or inefficient legal representation, Jennifer observed after reviewing the information I could provide. Most divorce cases, even contentious ones, can be resolved for significantly less money if handled strategically by experienced counsel. Her assessment introduced doubt about the necessity of the financial crisis that had prompted my father's ultimatum. If Victoria's legal expenses were excessive due to poor attorney selection or inefficient case management, then redirecting my wedding fund would enable continued poor decision-making rather than addressing the underlying problem. Would you be willing to review Victoria's legal bills and provide a second opinion about whether her expenses are reasonable? I asked, recognizing that objective professional assessment might reveal alternatives that my family had not considered. Jennifer agreed to conduct a preliminary review if Victoria would sign a release allowing her to examine the legal documentation and billing records. The prospect of professional oversight might encourage more efficient case management, while providing concrete information about whether the financial crisis was genuine emergency or manufactured urgency designed to access family resources. My second call went to Maria Santos, a financial planner who had helped several friends navigate major life transitions and who specialized in family financial dynamics. I explained the situation carefully, focusing on the pattern of financial decision-making within my family and the precedent that would be established by redirecting promised wedding funds toward Victoria's immediate crisis. The issue is not whether you can afford to help your sister or whether her situation deserves support, Maria explained after asking detailed questions about my family's financial history and decision-making patterns. The issue is whether creating this precedent serves your long-term financial and emotional well-being within these family relationships. Her perspective reframed the decision in terms of strategic consequence rather than immediate accommodation, helping me understand that my choice would influence how similar situations would be handled in the future. Agreeing to redirect my wedding fund would establish that my commitments were negotiable whenever someone else's crisis required additional resources. Based on what you have described about your family's financial decision-making patterns, I would recommend maintaining your boundary about the wedding fund, while offering to help identify alternative solutions for your sister's legal expenses. Maria advised. This approach demonstrates family support without establishing precedent that your important milestones can be sacrificed for other people's poor planning. Her recommendation aligned with my growing conviction that genuine family support did not require me to abandon my own dreams and commitments. Healthy relationships involved mutual consideration and creative problem-solving, rather than automatic sacrifice from the family member perceived as most capable of handling disappointment. My third call was more difficult, placed to my Aunt Carmen, my father's younger sister who had maintained close relationships with both Victoria and me throughout our childhood, and who often served as informal mediator during family conflicts. Carmen had successfully navigated her own career and marriage, while maintaining independence from the Rodriguez family's tendency toward financial entanglement and emotional manipulation. "I wondered when you were going to call me about this situation," Carmen said immediately upon hearing my voice. "Your father mentioned his conversation with you yesterday, and I have been waiting to hear your perspective." Her response suggested that my father had already begun building consensus among family members about the wisdom of redirecting my wedding fund toward Victoria's legal expenses. The possibility that my choice was being discussed and evaluated by extended family created additional pressure, while confirming that my decision would have consequences extending beyond my immediate relationship with my father and sister. "What do you think I should do?" I asked, genuinely seeking guidance from the family member whose judgment I trusted most completely. Carmen was quiet for a long moment before responding with characteristic directness. "I think you should ask yourself whether you want to establish a pattern where your important milestones can be sacrificed whenever someone else in this family makes poor decisions and needs rescue." Her question cut to the heart of the decision I faced, moving beyond immediate circumstances to examine long-term patterns and their implications for my future relationships within the family structure. Carmen's perspective was particularly valuable because she had successfully maintained boundaries with family members while preserving loving relationships that respected individual autonomy and mutual consideration. "Victoria has been making questionable choices about money and relationships since college," Carmen continued. "Your father has been enabling those choices by providing financial rescue whenever the consequences become uncomfortable. This pattern has not served Victoria well, because it has prevented her from developing skills in personal responsibility and strategic decision-making." Her analysis provided broader context for understanding how my father's proposal fit within established family dynamics that had not served anyone's long-term interests effectively. Enabling Victoria's continued poor decision-making through family financial rescue would perpetuate patterns that prevented her from developing genuine independence and competence. "What would you do in my situation?" I asked, seeking concrete guidance rather than abstract analysis. "I would tell your father that I remained committed to using the wedding fund for its intended purpose, while offering to help Victoria identify more cost-effective legal representation and alternative funding sources for her actual necessary expenses," Carmen replied, without hesitation. "I would demonstrate family support without sacrificing my own important commitments," Her recommendation provided a framework for maintaining my boundary while addressing legitimate concerns about Victoria's situation. The approach would test whether my family's primary concern was solving Victoria's problem or accessing my financial resources through emotional manipulation and manufactured urgency. Tuesday afternoon brought an unexpected visit from my mother, Elena Rodriguez, who appeared at my apartment during her lunch break from the elementary school where she worked as a bilingual education coordinator. My mother's involvement in family financial discussions was typically minimal, as she preferred to avoid conflict while supporting whatever arrangement my father ultimately negotiated. "Your father asked me to talk with you about Victoria's situation," she began, settling onto our living room couch with the careful posture of someone preparing for a difficult conversation. "He is concerned that you might make a decision based on emotion rather than practical consideration of family needs." The characterization of my reluctance to sacrifice my wedding fund as emotional rather than practical revealed the sophisticated narrative construction that had already begun within family discussions. My commitment to promises made and plans developed over 18 months was being reframed as irrational attachment, while Victoria's immediate crisis was positioned as objective priority requiring mature response. "What do you think about the situation?" I asked, genuinely curious about my mother's perspective on the family dynamics that had created this crisis. My mother sighed deeply, her expression revealing the exhaustion that came from decades of managing conflicting family interests, while avoiding direct confrontation with anyone's choices or behavior. "I think Victoria has always struggled with practical decision-making, and your father has always tried to protect both of you from the consequences of difficult circumstances." Her diplomatic response acknowledged family patterns without explicitly criticizing anyone's behavior or accepting responsibility for the enabling dynamics that had created Victoria's current crisis. The approach was characteristic of my mother's conflict avoidance strategies, but it also revealed her awareness that deeper issues were involved beyond immediate financial pressures. "Do you think it is fair to ask me to give up my wedding fund for Victoria's legal expenses?" I pressed, seeking her honest opinion rather than diplomatic neutrality. My mother was quiet for a long moment, her expressions cycling through various emotions before settling on resignation mixed with sadness. "I think fairness is complicated when family members have different strengths and different needs. You have always been the responsible one who could handle disappointment, while Victoria has always needed more support during difficult times." Her response revealed the family mythology that had justified years of unequal treatment disguised as accommodation for different personality types. My responsibility and emotional resilience had been weaponized to justify automatic sacrifice whenever family resources needed redistribution toward Victoria's various crises and expensive preferences. "But what about my needs?" I asked, surprised by the directness of my own question. "What about my dreams and plans? Do they matter less because I can handle disappointment better than Victoria handles responsibility?" My mother's face crumpled slightly, revealing pain that she typically concealed beneath diplomatic neutrality and conflict avoidance. "Your needs have always mattered, Emma. But sometimes life requires us to prioritize immediate crises over long-term celebrations." The response demonstrated how thoroughly my family had internalized the belief that my important milestones were celebrations rather than needs, while Victoria's poor planning created crises that demanded immediate family sacrifice. The distinction was both subtle and devastating, revealing how systematically my dreams had been minimized through language that positioned them as luxury rather than legitimate aspiration. "My wedding is not just a celebration," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. "It is the beginning of my married life with David, the culmination of 18 months of careful planning, and the fulfillment of a promise Dad made to me 5 years ago. It represents dreams that matter as much as Victoria's immediate crisis." My mother nodded slowly, but her expression remained conflicted between understanding my perspective and maintaining family harmony through continued accommodation of established patterns. "I understand that your wedding is important to you, but Victoria's situation affects her entire future, while your wedding could be postponed or scaled back without permanent consequences." Her reasoning demonstrated the sophisticated rationalization system that had evolved to justify systematic prioritization of Victoria's immediate wants over my long-term commitments and careful planning. The framework positioned my father's broken promise as temporary inconvenience, while presenting Victoria's divorce expenses as permanent emergency, requiring immediate family intervention. Actually, Mom, redirecting my wedding fund would have permanent consequences, I replied, recognizing that clarity about implications was essential for authentic family discussion. It would establish that promises made to me can be broken whenever someone else in the family faces a crisis. It would confirm that my careful planning and patient saving are less valuable than Victoria's immediate problems. It would prove that my dreams are negotiable while other people's emergencies are absolute. My mother's expression shifted as she processed the broader implications of the choice I was being asked to make. For perhaps the first time, she understood that the wedding fund controversy was not simply about money allocation, but about family dynamics and relationship equity that had been carefully constructed over decades of subtle discrimination disguised as practical decision-making. I had not thought about it that way, she admitted quietly. I was focused on immediate needs rather than long-term patterns. Her acknowledgement represented significant progress in family awareness about the dynamics that had created this crisis. However, awareness did not necessarily translate into changed behavior or support for different approaches to family problem solving. Wednesday morning arrived with my father's deadline for responding to his proposal to redirect my wedding fund toward Victoria's legal expenses. I had spent Tuesday evening in extensive conversation with David, reviewing all the information I had gathered and considering the various perspectives I had received from trusted advisors and family members. The decision had crystallized into startling clarity. I would maintain my boundary about the wedding fund while offering to help Victoria identify alternative solutions for her legal expenses. The approach would demonstrate genuine family support without establishing precedent that my important commitments could be sacrificed whenever someone else's crisis demanded immediate attention. The phone call to my father required courage I had never previously accessed in family relationships. I dialed his office number during his morning appointment scheduling time, knowing that professional environment might encourage more measured discussion than emotional appeals designed to pressure immediate accommodation. "Emma, I am glad you called," he said upon answering, his voice carrying expectation that I had accepted his proposal and was ready to discuss implementation details. "Victoria's attorney needs confirmation about the funding by noon today." "Dad, I have decided to maintain the wedding fund for its intended purpose," I said clearly, my voice steady despite the anxiety coursing through my system. "However, I want to help Victoria find alternative solutions for her legal expenses that do not require breaking promises made to other family members." The silence that followed lasted long enough for me to wonder whether the phone connection had been lost. When my father finally responded, his voice carried disappointment, mixed with surprise at my unexpected resistance to family pressure and manufactured urgency. "Emma, I am very disappointed in this decision. I thought you understood that family loyalty requires sacrifice when other family members are in crisis." His response confirmed that my choice would be characterized as disloyalty rather than boundary maintenance, selfishness rather than commitment to promises and careful planning. The predictable narrative construction no longer carried the emotional weight it had previously held, because I had developed clarity about the difference between genuine family support and systematic enabling of irresponsible behavior. I understand family loyalty as mutual consideration and creative problem-solving rather than automatic sacrifice from the family member perceived as most capable of handling disappointment, I replied, surprised by the strength and clarity in my own voice. The conversation concluded with my father expressing hope that I would reconsider my decision before causing permanent damage to family relationships and Victoria's future security. The threat of relationship consequences was familiar territory, but for the first time I understood that preserving relationships that required me to minimize my own importance was not actually preservation, but was instead prolonged self-destruction disguised as family loyalty. The decision had been made, and my journey toward authentic self-advocacy had officially begun. The path ahead would require sustained courage and continued boundary maintenance, but it would also lead toward relationships based on mutual respect, rather than systematic accommodation of family members who had never learned to consider other people's needs as equally important as their own immediate desires. The discovery of hidden strength had emerged through the necessity of protecting dreams that mattered more than family approval. The realization was both empowering and sobering, opening possibilities I had never considered while requiring me to accept consequences I could not fully anticipate. The woman who would emerge from this crisis would be fundamentally different from the accommodating daughter who had entered it, and that transformation would benefit everyone involved, even if they could not initially recognize the gift of authentic relationship over comfortable manipulation. The aftermath of my phone call with my father created a silence in our apartment that felt both heavy and liberating. Wednesday afternoon stretched before me with unusual emptiness, as if the boundary I had established with my family had cleared away not just their immediate expectations, but also the constant undercurrent of anxiety about maintaining their approval that had shaped my daily existence for years. David returned from work that evening to find me sitting at our kitchen table with wedding planning materials spread before me like a declaration of independence. Vendor contracts, budget spreadsheets, timeline documents, and inspiration photos created a visual manifesto of dreams that I had chosen to protect rather than sacrifice for family harmony. "How did the conversation go?" he asked, settling beside me with the careful attention of someone who understood that significant personal transformation was unfolding before his eyes. I recounted the phone call with my father, describing both his disappointment and my unexpected sense of clarity about the choice I had made. David listened without interruption, his expression reflecting pride mixed with concern about the family conflict that would inevitably follow my decision to prioritize our wedding plans over Victoria's legal expenses. "I am proud of you for standing up for what matters to us," he said when I finished describing the conversation. "But I am also concerned about how your family will respond to your boundary. Are you prepared for the pressure they might apply to change your decision?" Quote. His question addressed the practical reality that my Wednesday phone call represented only the beginning of a family conflict that would likely escalate as Victoria's legal deadline approached, and alternative funding sources failed to materialize. My father's disappointment had been measured and professional, but I anticipated that future conversations would involve more emotional manipulation and systematic pressure from multiple family members. "I think the pressure will be intense," I admitted, recognizing that honesty about challenges would serve me better than optimistic denial of likely difficulties. "But I also think that giving in to that pressure would establish a pattern that would affect our entire marriage and any future relationship I have with my family." Quote. David nodded with understanding that came from witnessing the family dynamics that had shaped our relationship from its earliest stages. He had observed countless examples of my automatic accommodation to family preferences, my careful management of their emotions, and my systematic minimization of my own needs to preserve harmony and avoid conflict. "What can I do to support you through whatever happens next?" he asked, focusing on practical assistance rather than abstract encouragement. His question prompted discussion about strategies for managing family pressure while maintaining commitment to our wedding plans and timeline. We identified specific approaches for handling phone calls, text messages, and in-person confrontations that might be designed to wear down my resistance through emotional exhaustion and manufactured urgency. Thursday brought the first wave of family response to my decision, beginning with a lengthy voicemail from Victoria that alternated between hurt disappointment and subtle threats about permanent relationship damage. Her message lasted nearly 10 minutes, progressing through sophisticated emotional manipulation techniques that demonstrated years of practice in achieving desired outcomes through strategic vulnerability and guilt induction. "Emma, I cannot believe you would prioritize a party over your sister's future security." Victoria's recorded voice explained with wounded dignity. "I always thought family meant more to you than expensive celebrations that could easily be postponed or scaled back." "I guess I was wrong about the person I thought you were." The message continued with detailed descriptions of her legal vulnerabilities, the financial consequences she would face without immediate family assistance, and the disappointment that other family members were expressing about my selfishness and lack of family loyalty. Each element was carefully calculated to maximize emotional impact, while positioning my wedding as frivolous luxury compared to her desperate circumstances. Rather than responding immediately, I decided to let the message settle while I processed my emotional reactions and developed clear thinking about how to address the manipulation tactics Victoria was employing. The temptation to defend myself or explain my reasoning was strong, but I recognized that engagement would likely escalate the conflict while providing Victoria with additional opportunities to refine her pressure strategies. Friday afternoon brought an unexpected visit from my grandmother Rosa Rodriguez, my father's 82-year-old mother who typically avoided involvement in family conflicts while maintaining loving relationships with all her children and grandchildren. Her appearance at my apartment represented significant escalation in family response to my decision, as her influence often proved decisive in resolving disputes through moral authority and emotional appeals. "Misha," she said, using the affectionate term that had comforted me throughout childhood, "I want to understand your thinking about this situation with Victoria and the wedding money." Her approach was characteristically gentle and respectful, seeking information rather than immediately applying pressure or expressing judgment about my choice. However, I understood that her visit had been coordinated with my father, and that her questions would likely lead toward encouragement to reconsider my decision in favor of family harmony and traditional values about mutual support during crises. "Abuela, I love Victoria and want to help her during this difficult time," I began, establishing my family loyalty before explaining my boundary. "But I also believe that keeping promises and honoring commitments are important values that should not be abandoned whenever someone faces a crisis." My grandmother nodded thoughtfully, her expression revealing the complex emotions that accompanied family disputes involving competing valid concerns and legitimate needs. "Victoria is struggling, Misha. Divorce is very difficult, especially when there are lawyers and money problems involved." "I understand that divorce is difficult," I replied carefully, "but I also think that constantly rescuing Victoria from the consequences of her choices has not helped her develop the skills she needs to manage her own life successfully." The observation represented a level of direct criticism about family dynamics that I had never previously expressed to my grandmother, whose traditional values typically emphasized family unity and mutual support over individual accountability and personal responsibility. Her reaction would provide important information about whether honest discussion about problematic patterns was possible within our family structure. "Perhaps you are right that Victoria has been protected from consequences too much," my grandmother admitted after a long pause. "But sometimes protection is necessary when family members are vulnerable and facing serious difficulties." Her response acknowledged merit in my perspective while maintaining emphasis on family protection and mutual assistance during crises. The balanced approach provided opening for continued discussion rather than immediate pressure to abandon my position in favor of traditional accommodation patterns. "I agree that protection is sometimes necessary," I said, building on her acknowledgement. "But I think the protection should come through helping Victoria find appropriate legal representation and financial resources, rather than breaking promises made to other family members." My grandmother's expression shifted as she processed the distinction between different types of family support and their long-term implications for everyone involved. "What kind of help are you willing to provide for Victoria?" The question represented significant progress in family discussion, moving from automatic assumption that I would sacrifice my wedding fund toward exploration of alternative approaches that might address Victoria's needs without requiring me to abandon my own important commitments and careful planning. I explained the research I had conducted about Victoria's legal expenses, the professional opinions I had obtained about cost-effectiveness and strategic approaches to divorce litigation, and my willingness to help identify resources and strategies that might reduce her financial burden without requiring family members to break existing promises and commitments. "This sounds like a thoughtful approach to helping your sister," my grandmother said with surprising approval. "Perhaps it would be more helpful for Victoria's long-term success than simply giving her money without addressing the underlying problems." Her endorsement of alternative support strategies represented crucial development in family dynamics, suggesting that influential family members might be willing to consider approaches that balanced individual accountability with collective assistance. The possibility of broader family support for boundary maintenance rather than automatic accommodation created hope for resolution that preserved both relationships and personal integrity. Saturday morning brought the weekend that would fundamentally alter my understanding of family relationships and personal strength. David had planned a day trip to Mount Rainier National Park, recognizing that natural beauty and physical activity might provide perspective and emotional restoration during this challenging period of family conflict. The drive to the mountains offered opportunity for extended conversation about the week's developments and their implications for our future relationship with my family. David's calm analysis of family manipulation tactics helped me understand how sophisticated and systematic the pressure campaign had become, while his unwavering support provided emotional anchor during the storm of conflicting loyalties and manufactured urgency. Your family is treating this situation as if Victoria's poor legal strategy is an emergency that justifies breaking promises made to you, David observed as we wound through forested mountain roads toward our hiking destination. But actual emergencies typically involve immediate threats to safety or health, not expensive legal representation choices. His perspective provided clarity about the difference between genuine crisis requiring family support and manufactured urgency designed to access family resources through emotional manipulation. The distinction was crucial for maintaining appropriate boundaries while remaining responsive to legitimate family needs. The hiking trail we selected offered moderate challenge through old-growth forest leading to alpine meadows with panoramic mountain views. The physical effort required for steady climbing provided outlet for the emotional tension that had accumulated throughout the week, while the natural environment offered perspective that diminished the manufactured urgency surrounding Victoria's legal expenses. Halfway up the trail, we encountered another couple who were celebrating their recent engagement with a weekend camping trip to mark the beginning of their wedding planning process. Their enthusiasm about venue selection and vendor coordination reminded me why David and I had invested so much time and emotional energy in creating our ideal celebration. "We have been planning for 8 months already," the woman explained while we shared trail mix and water during a rest break. "The process has been so much fun, bringing our families together and creating something beautiful that represents our love and commitment." Quote. Her description of wedding planning as collaborative family experience highlighted how different my situation had become from typical family involvement in wedding celebrations. Rather than supporting my joy and participating in planning activities, my family had repositioned my wedding as negotiable expense that could be sacrificed for more urgent priorities. The conversation with the engaged couple continued as we hiked together toward the meadow destination, sharing stories about vendor selection, budget management, and family dynamics during wedding planning. Their experience of family support and enthusiasm contrasted sharply with the pressure and guilt I was experiencing from my own relatives. "My future mother-in-law has been so helpful with planning," the woman continued. "She keeps saying that weddings are investments in family happiness and that creating beautiful celebrations strengthens relationships for generations." Her description of wedding planning as investment in family happiness rather than selfish expense provided alternative framework for understanding the value and importance of ceremonial celebrations. The perspective validated my commitment to protecting our wedding plans, while highlighting how unusual my family's approach had become. Reaching the alpine meadow provided emotional breakthrough that crystallized my understanding of the choice I was making and its broader implications for my future relationships. Standing among wildflowers with mountain peaks surrounding us, I experienced clarity about my own worth and the legitimacy of my dreams that transcended family approval or disapproval. "I deserve to have the wedding we planned," I said aloud, the words carrying conviction that surprised me with its strength. "I deserve to have my promises kept and my dreams respected. I deserve to be treated as if my happiness matters as much as anyone else's in my family." David embraced me among the wildflowers, his support providing physical anchor for the emotional revelation that was transforming my understanding of healthy relationships and personal boundaries. The moment marked transition from questioning my decision to embracing it fully, regardless of family consequences or continued pressure campaigns. The descent from the meadow provided opportunity to discuss practical strategies for maintaining my boundary while managing ongoing family conflict. David's perspective on conflict resolution emphasized consistency, clear communication, and refusal to engage with manipulation tactics, while remaining open to genuine problem-solving approaches. Sunday morning brought the most significant family confrontation yet, when my father appeared at our apartment accompanied by Victoria and my uncle Miguel, my father's brother who often provided backup during difficult family negotiations. The delegation approach represented escalation, designed to overwhelm my resistance through numerical advantage and collective family pressure. "Emma, we need to resolve this situation before Victoria's legal deadline tomorrow," my father began, his tone carrying authority that had intimidated me throughout childhood, but which I now recognized as performance designed to avoid genuine negotiation or compromise. Victoria appeared genuinely distressed, her emotional state reflecting either authentic anxiety about her legal situation or strategic vulnerability designed to generate sympathy and immediate capitulation to family pressure. Her appearance was calculated to maximize emotional impact, emphasizing the consequences of my refusal to sacrifice my wedding fund. "I cannot believe my own sister would let me lose everything because she wants an expensive party," Victoria said, tears beginning to flow as she delivered her prepared emotional appeal. "I thought family meant more to you than fancy decorations and expensive photographers." The characterization of our carefully planned wedding as expensive party revealed the systematic narrative construction that had developed within family discussions about my decision. My 18 months of planning and David's equal investment in creating our ideal celebration had been reduced to frivolous luxury that could be easily abandoned for more important family priorities. "Victoria, I want to help you find solutions for your legal expenses," I replied, maintaining calm tone despite the emotional pressure being applied through her tears and dramatic presentation. "But I also want to keep the promise Dad made to me about wedding funding and honor the 18 months of planning that David and I have invested in our celebration." My Uncle Miguel, who typically remained neutral during family conflicts, surprised me by speaking in support of alternative approaches to Victoria's crisis. "Perhaps we should explore whether Victoria's legal expenses are reasonable before asking Emma to sacrifice her wedding plans," he suggested with diplomatic wisdom that acknowledged multiple perspectives. His intervention shifted family dynamics by introducing possibility that Victoria's crisis might be addressed through strategies other than automatic sacrifice from the family member, perceived as most capable of handling disappointment. The suggestion represented significant development in family problem-solving approaches. The weekend concluded with family agreement to postpone final decisions until Victoria's legal expenses could be reviewed by independent attorney Jennifer Walsh, whose professional assessment might reveal whether the crisis was genuine emergency or result of inefficient legal representation. The compromise provided face-saving opportunity for all parties while creating space for objective analysis of the actual situation. Sunday evening, as David and I reviewed the weekend's developments, I recognized that fundamental transformation had occurred in my relationship with my family and my understanding of my own worth and boundaries. The weekend had tested my resolve while providing experiences that validated my decision and strengthened my commitment to authentic relationships based on mutual respect rather than systematic accommodation. "I feel different than I did a week ago," I told David as we prepared for bed. "I feel stronger and clearer about what I deserve and what kind of relationships I want to have with my family." The weekend that had begun with family confrontation and emotional manipulation had concluded with breakthrough understanding about personal strength and the courage required to maintain boundaries even when relationships became difficult or temporarily strained. The woman who had entered the weekend questioning her decision had emerged with conviction that would sustain her through whatever challenges lay ahead in her journey toward authentic family relationships and personal empowerment. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of autumn, Seattle's persistent drizzle replaced by unexpected sunshine that seemed to mirror the internal transformation I had experienced over the weekend. The compromise reached during Sunday's family confrontation had created space for objective professional assessment of Victoria's legal situation, providing pathway toward resolution that honored both family support and personal boundaries. Jennifer Walsh had agreed to conduct expedited review of Victoria's legal documentation and billing records, with Victoria reluctantly signing release forms that would allow independent attorney to examine case management strategies and expense justification. The professional assessment would either validate the financial crisis that had prompted my father's ultimatum or reveal inefficiencies that could be addressed through alternative approaches. David left for work that morning with reassuring kiss and reminder that whatever Jennifer's assessment revealed, my decision to maintain boundaries around the wedding fund had been correct, based on information available and family dynamics patterns that had persisted throughout my adult life. His unwavering support provided emotional stability during the anxious waiting period that would determine how family relationships would evolve moving forward. My phone buzzed with text message from Jennifer Walsh, requesting meeting that afternoon to discuss her preliminary findings about Victoria's legal expenses and case management approach. The rapid timeline suggested that her analysis had revealed significant information that required immediate discussion and strategic planning. Jennifer's law office occupied corner suite in downtown Seattle high-rise, her professional credentials and industry recognition evident in award plaques and bar association certificates covering office walls. She greeted me with serious expression that indicated her review of Victoria's legal situation had produced concerning discoveries about expense justification and strategic approaches. "Emma, I need to share some difficult information about your sister's legal expenses and the circumstances that created her financial crisis," Jennifer began, settling behind her desk with Victoria's case files spread before her like evidence in criminal investigation. Her tone carried weight of professional responsibility mixed with personal concern about family dynamics that had created unnecessary crisis through poor decision-making and inadequate oversight. The documentation she had reviewed painted a troubling picture of legal representation that prioritized billable hours over client interests and strategic outcomes. Victoria's legal expenses are approximately 3 times higher than reasonable for a divorce case involving her level of assets and complexity, Jennifer explained, pointing to billing summaries that revealed patterns of inefficient case management and questionable strategic decisions. The revelation struck me with mixture of vindication and sadness, confirming my intuition that Victoria's crisis had been manufactured through poor choices rather than representing genuine emergency requiring family sacrifice. The excessive legal expenses reflected a pattern of irresponsible decision-making that had characterized Victoria's approach to financial management throughout her adult life. Jennifer continued her analysis by describing specific examples of inefficient legal strategies that had unnecessarily escalated conflict and extended proceedings beyond reasonable timeframes. Victoria's attorney had pursued aggressive litigation approaches that generated substantial billable hours while producing minimal advancement towards settlement or favorable outcome. Your sister could achieve significantly better results with competent legal representation that costs approximately $12,000 total, Jennifer assessed, presenting an alternative approach that would address Victoria's legitimate legal needs without requiring massive family financial intervention. The information fundamentally altered the context of family discussions about wedding fund redirection and emergency support for Victoria's divorce proceedings. Rather than facing genuine crisis requiring immediate family rescue, Victoria was experiencing consequences of poor attorney selection and strategic decision-making that could be corrected through appropriate professional guidance. Would Victoria be receptive to changing legal representation at this stage in her proceedings? I asked, recognizing that practical solutions existed if family members could overcome emotional attachment to current crisis narrative and systematic enabling patterns. Jennifer nodded with confidence based on her professional experience managing similar transitions between attorneys during ongoing divorce cases. Attorney transitions are common during complex proceedings, especially when clients recognize that current representation is not serving their interests effectively. Her assessment provided a roadmap for addressing Victoria's legitimate legal needs through strategic approaches that did not require family members to sacrifice their own important commitments or break promises made during previous planning cycles. The solution honored family support values while maintaining individual accountability and personal responsibility. Tuesday morning brought a phone call from my father, his voice carrying a mixture of surprise and reluctance, as he processed Jennifer's assessment of Victoria's legal expenses and alternative approaches to case management. The independent professional review had challenged family assumptions about crisis necessity, while revealing uncomfortable truths about enabling patterns and accountability avoidance. Jennifer Walsh says Victoria's legal bills are excessive and that competent representation should cost much less. My father reported, his tone suggesting difficulty accepting information that contradicted established family narrative about emergency circumstances and required sacrifices. His reluctance to acknowledge professional assessment reflected deeper resistance to examining family patterns that had created current crisis through systematic avoidance of individual accountability and strategic problem solving. Accepting Jennifer's analysis would require family members to confront uncomfortable truths about enabling behaviors and their long-term consequences. What does Victoria think about Jennifer's recommendations? I asked, curious about my sister's willingness to accept responsibility for poor attorney selection and consider alternative approaches that required personal accountability rather than family financial rescue. My father paused before responding, his silence suggesting that Victoria's reaction to professional assessment had been defensive, rather than receptive to constructive feedback and strategic course correction. Victoria feels that Jennifer is being critical without understanding the emotional complexity of her divorce situation. The response revealed Victoria's characteristic pattern of deflecting responsibility through emotional appeals and resistance to professional guidance that required personal accountability for decision-making outcomes. Her unwillingness to acknowledge poor attorney selection reflected broader tendency to avoid examining her own choices and their consequences. Dad, regardless of Victoria's emotional response, the professional assessment provides objective information about how to address her legal needs efficiently. I replied, maintaining focus on practical solutions rather than emotional dynamics that had consistently prevented effective family problem-solving. My father's discomfort with objective professional assessment became more apparent as he struggled to maintain family narrative about emergency circumstances, while acknowledging expert opinion that contradicted established assumptions about crisis severity and required interventions. I understand that Jennifer has expertise in family law, but she does not understand our family dynamics and the importance of supporting Victoria during this difficult transition, he argued, reverting to familiar emotional appeals that had historically overridden practical considerations and professional guidance. His response demonstrated sophisticated resistance to information that challenged family patterns, while maintaining appearance of reasonableness and concern for Victoria's well-being. The approach allowed continued enabling behaviors while avoiding acknowledgement of their counterproductive effects on everyone involved. Wednesday afternoon brought breakthrough conversation with my Aunt Carmen, who had independently contacted Jennifer Walsh to discuss Victoria's legal situation and family dynamics that had created unnecessary crisis, through systematic avoidance of individual accountability and strategic problem-solving approaches. Jennifer's assessment confirms what I suspected about Victoria's approach to this divorce. Carmen reported with characteristic directness that had made her valuable family advisor during previous conflicts and decision-making challenges. Her willingness to seek independent professional perspective demonstrated healthy approach to family problem-solving that prioritized effective outcomes over emotional accommodation and conflict avoidance. Carmen's perspective provided crucial family support for evidence-based decision-making rather than manipulation and guilt-based resource allocation. Victoria has been making poor choices about legal representation, just like she made poor choices about financial management during her marriage. Carmen continued, connecting current crisis to broader patterns that had persisted throughout Victoria's adult development. The analysis provided context for understanding how family-enabling patterns had prevented Victoria from developing essential life skills, while creating recurring crises that required external rescue and resource redirection from other family members, legitimate plans and commitments. Carmen's perspective validated my boundary-setting approach while offering framework for continued family support that emphasized individual accountability and strategic problem-solving, rather than automatic financial accommodation whenever crises emerge through poor decision-making. I think you should maintain your position about the wedding fund while offering to help Victoria transition to competent legal representation, Carmen advised, providing specific guidance that balanced family loyalty with personal integrity and boundary maintenance. Her recommendation aligned with my own analysis while providing family ally who understood both immediate practical considerations and long-term relationship implications of different approaches to crisis resolution and ongoing family dynamics. Thursday morning brought unexpected visit from Victoria herself, who appeared at my apartment with carefully prepared emotional appeal designed to bypass professional assessment and objective analysis in favor of direct sisterly manipulation and guilt induction techniques. Emma, I know you talked to that attorney about my case, and I want you to understand that she does not know what I am going through emotionally. Victoria began, positioning Jennifer's professional expertise as irrelevant compared to emotional complexity that supposedly required family accommodation rather than strategic problem-solving. Her approach demonstrated sophisticated understanding of manipulation tactics while revealing unwillingness to engage with practical solutions that required personal accountability for attorney selection and case management decisions. The strategy represented escalation designed to overwhelm objective analysis through emotional intensity and sisterly loyalty appeals. Victoria, Jennifer's assessment provides roadmap for addressing your legal needs efficiently while reducing your financial burden, I replied, maintaining focus on practical outcomes rather than engaging with emotional manipulation designed to avoid accountability and strategic course correction. Victoria's expression shifted from wounded vulnerability to frustrated anger, as she recognized that emotional appeals were not achieving desired result of automatic accommodation and boundary abandonment. Her response revealed calculation behind previous emotional presentations, while confirming that genuine problem-solving required different approach. "I cannot believe you would trust some stranger's opinion over your own sister's experience and needs," Victoria responded, attempting to reframe professional expertise as betrayal of family loyalty rather than objective assessment that served everyone's long-term interests. The characterization of Jennifer Walsh as stranger rather than experienced family law attorney demonstrated Victoria's systematic resistance to information that challenged her preferred crisis narrative and resource allocation expectations. Her approach prioritized immediate accommodation over sustainable solutions that addressed underlying problems. "Victoria, Jennifer is not a stranger. She is an experienced family law attorney whose assessment could help you achieve better outcomes with lower costs," I corrected, refusing to accept false characterization of professional guidance as family betrayal or external interference. The conversation continued with Victoria cycling through various emotional appeals and manipulation tactics, each designed to generate guilt and immediate capitulation to her resource demands, without engaging constructively with alternative approaches that required personal accountability and strategic thinking. Friday brought family meeting at my parents' house, organized by my father to address Victoria's legal situation through collective discussion and decision-making that would presumably result in continued enabling rather than strategic problem-solving and individual accountability measures. The gathering included my parents, Victoria, Uncle Miguel, and Aunt Carmen, representing cross-section of family perspectives and interests that would need alignment for sustainable resolution of current crisis and prevention of similar future situations involving resource redirection and boundary violations. My father opened discussion by summarizing Jennifer Walsh's assessment while attempting to minimize its implications for family decision-making and Victoria's need for continued financial support, despite professional recommendations for alternative approaches to legal representation and case management. Jennifer Walsh suggests that Victoria could achieve similar results with different attorney for much less money, but we need to consider whether changing legal representation at this stage would create additional risks or complications, he presented, framing professional assessment as opinion rather than expert guidance based on extensive case analysis. His approach demonstrated continued resistance to objective information while maintaining appearance of reasonable consideration for all perspectives and factors. The strategy allowed family members to reject professional guidance while appearing thoughtful and comprehensive in their decision-making process. Victoria reinforced her father's resistance by describing emotional attachment to current attorney and concerns about transition complications, emphasizing feelings and familiarity over strategic outcomes and cost efficiency that Jennifer's assessment had identified as achievable through competent alternative representation. Uncle Miguel surprised family members by expressing support for Jennifer's recommendations and questioning patterns of financial enabling that had prevented Victoria from developing essential decision-making skills and accountability measures throughout her adult development. Perhaps Victoria would benefit more from learning to make better choices about professional services, rather than having family members rescue her from consequences of poor decision-making, he suggested, introducing perspective that prioritized long-term development over immediate accommodation. His intervention created opening for honest discussion about family dynamics and their effects on individual development and collective well-being, moving beyond immediate crisis management toward examination of underlying patterns and their sustainability for everyone involved. Aunt Carmen reinforced Miguel's perspective by describing successful approaches to family support that maintained individual accountability, while providing appropriate assistance during legitimate crises that could not be addressed through personal resources and strategic planning. Healthy family support helps people develop skills to handle future challenges independently rather than creating dependence on external rescue whenever problems emerge, she observed, providing framework for evaluating different approaches to Victoria's situation and their long-term implications. The discussion continued for 2 hours, with family members gradually acknowledging that Victoria's crisis had been unnecessarily expensive due to poor attorney selection, rather than representing genuine emergency, requiring immediate family sacrifice and resource redirection from other commitments. By evening, consensus had emerged around supporting Victoria's transition to competent legal representation that Jennifer Walsh would recommend, while maintaining existing promises and commitments to other family members, rather than establishing precedent that individual poor decisions created collective obligations for financial rescue. The family meeting concluded with Victoria reluctantly agreeing to consult with alternative attorneys that Jennifer would recommend, while family members committed to supporting transition costs that were substantially lower than original crisis projections and resource demands. Saturday morning brought profound sense of relief mixed with validation, as I recognized that boundary maintenance had produced outcomes that served everyone's long-term interests more effectively than automatic accommodation would have achieved. The professional assessment had revealed truth that enabled strategic problem-solving rather than crisis-driven resource redirection. David and I spent weekend reviewing wedding plans and timeline, confirming that vendor contracts and celebration preparations would proceed as originally scheduled with funding that my father had promised 5 years earlier, and that represented years of careful planning and anticipation. "I am proud of how you handled this situation," David said as we reviewed photographer contracts and reception venue details. "You found a way to support your sister while maintaining integrity about your own important commitments and promises." His observation highlighted how authentic problem-solving had produced better outcomes than manipulation and guilt-based decision-making would have achieved, validating an approach that balanced family loyalty with personal boundaries and individual accountability measures. The weekend concluded with a phone call from Jennifer Walsh, confirming that Victoria had scheduled consultations with 2 experienced family law attorneys who specialized in efficient divorce resolution and strategic case management rather than prolonged litigation and excessive billing practices. Victoria seems more receptive to alternative approaches now that family pressure has been reduced, and she understands that competent representation will actually serve her interests more effectively, Jennifer reported, suggesting that boundary maintenance had created space for genuine problem-solving. The truth that had emerged through professional assessment and family boundary setting had liberated everyone from crisis narrative that served no one's actual interests, while creating unnecessary conflict and resource strain. Victoria would receive appropriate legal representation, family relationships could heal from manipulation and guilt-based interactions, and my wedding would proceed as planned with celebration that honored years of careful preparation and mutual commitment to shared future. The journey toward authenticity had required courage to resist family pressure and maintain boundaries despite emotional manipulation and manufactured urgency. However, the outcome demonstrated that truth-based decision-making served everyone's long-term interests more effectively than accommodation patterns that enabled poor choices while preventing genuine personal development and family health. The week following the family meeting brought a profound shift in dynamics that I had not anticipated when I first decided to maintain boundaries around my wedding fund. Victoria's reluctant agreement to consult with alternative attorneys had created breathing space in family tension, while the objective professional assessment had provided foundation for strategic problem-solving rather than crisis-driven resource allocation. Monday morning arrived with text message from my mother, requesting private lunch meeting to discuss recent developments and her own reflections on family patterns that had created unnecessary conflict and emotional strain for everyone involved. Her outreach represented significant departure from typical conflict avoidance strategies, suggesting that recent events had prompted deeper examination of family dynamics and their long-term sustainability. Elena Rodriguez had spent 32 years navigating between her husband's decisive leadership style and her daughter's competing needs and personalities, typically serving as diplomatic intermediary, who smoothed conflicts without addressing underlying patterns that created recurring tensions and resource competition between family members. The restaurant she selected for our lunch meeting was a quiet bistro near her elementary school, chosen for privacy and convenience during her limited break time between morning and afternoon classes. Her expression carried mixture of exhaustion and determination as she settled across from me, her carefully composed demeanor suggesting that this conversation would address topics she had avoided discussing for years. "Emma, I want to talk about what happened last week and some things I have been thinking about regarding our family and how we handle conflicts and support each other," she began, her voice carrying uncharacteristic directness that indicated significant internal processing had occurred since the family meeting. Her approach represented departure from typical diplomatic neutrality, suggesting that recent events had forced examination of family patterns and their effects on individual well-being and collective health. The willingness to engage in direct conversation about problematic dynamics indicated potential for authentic relationship development rather than continued surface-level harmony maintenance. I realized during the family meeting that I have been enabling some unhealthy patterns by always trying to keep peace rather than addressing problems directly, she continued, demonstrating awareness that had emerged through witnessing how boundary setting had produced better outcomes than accommodation strategies. Her acknowledgement carried weight of personal responsibility mixed with genuine concern for family relationships and individual development that had been compromised through years of conflict avoidance and automatic resource redirection toward whoever presented most immediate emotional crisis or financial emergency. What specifically have you been thinking about? I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective on family dynamics that had shaped my entire adult relationship with parents and sister. My mother paused thoughtfully before responding, her expression reflecting complex emotions associated with examining long-established patterns and their unintended consequences for family members, individual growth, and collective well-being. I have been thinking about how differently we have treated you and Victoria over the years, and how that difference has not served either of you well, she admitted, her honesty representing significant breakthrough in family awareness and accountability. The observation demonstrated recognition that systematic inequality in expectations and support had created problems for both daughters, preventing Victoria from developing essential life skills, while burdening me with disproportionate responsibility for family emotional management and accommodation of others' poor decisions. Victoria has never learned to handle difficulties independently because we have always rescued her from consequences of her choices, my mother continued, connecting current crisis to broader patterns of enabling that had prevented healthy development and individual accountability. Her analysis validated concerns I had expressed about family approaches to problem solving, while acknowledging that well-intentioned protection had ultimately harmed Victoria by preventing skill development and personal responsibility that would serve her throughout adult life. And you have been expected to always be the responsible one who can handle disappointment and sacrifice for family harmony, she added, recognizing how systematic expectations had shaped my role within family structure in ways that minimized my own needs and aspirations. The acknowledgement represented significant progress in family understanding about how established patterns had affected individual development and relationship equity, creating foundation for healthier approaches to mutual support that honored both collective concern and personal boundaries. Our conversation continued with my mother describing specific examples of differential treatment that had occurred throughout our childhood and adolescence, instances where Victoria's emotional reactions had prompted immediate accommodation, while my reasonable responses had been interpreted as evidence that I required less support and attention. When Victoria cried about not getting the expensive prom dress she wanted, we found ways to afford it because her distress seemed so intense. My mother recalled, connecting past patterns to current expectations about resource allocation and family priorities. But when you quietly accepted the less expensive dress and made it beautiful with your own alterations, we interpreted that as proof that you were happy with less, rather than recognizing that you had learned to minimize your needs to avoid creating family conflict, she continued, demonstrating new understanding about how accommodation strategies had been misinterpreted as contentment rather than self-suppression. The examples provided concrete illustration of how family decision-making had systematically prioritized emotional intensity over reasoned consideration, creating incentive structure that rewarded dramatic presentation while penalizing mature response to disappointment and practical constraint. I realize now that we taught Victoria that emotional reactions would generate family support while teaching you that quiet acceptance would be rewarded with continued expectations for sacrifice and accommodation, my mother observed, articulating dynamic that had shaped both daughters, approaches to problem-solving and relationship management. Her analysis revealed sophisticated understanding of how family patterns had influenced individual development in ways that served no one's long-term interests, creating dependency in Victoria, while overburdening me with responsibility for family harmony and collective well-being. Tuesday evening brought unexpected phone call from Victoria herself, her tone carrying unfamiliar vulnerability mixed with genuine appreciation that represented significant departure from typical manipulation tactics and emotional appeals designed to generate guilt and immediate accommodation. "Emma, I wanted to thank you for insisting on the legal review," she began, her voice lacking the calculated emotional intensity that had characterized previous conversations about her divorce expenses and family support expectations. The opening statement surprised me with its acknowledgement of boundary setting as helpful rather than betrayal, suggesting that professional assessment and strategic problem-solving had produced outcomes that Victoria could recognize as beneficial despite initial resistance to accountability and alternative approaches. "Jennifer Walsh recommended an attorney who specializes in efficient divorce resolution, and she thinks my case can be settled within 6 weeks for less than $15,000 total." Victoria continued, providing concrete information that validated professional assessment while demonstrating positive results from strategic approach to legal representation. The development represented dramatic reduction in financial pressure, while offering timeline for resolution that would address Victoria's legitimate legal needs without requiring ongoing family crisis management and resource redirection from other commitments and promises. "I also wanted to apologize for how I approached this situation with you, and for the pressure I put on you to sacrifice your wedding fund," Victoria added, demonstrating awareness that had emerged through experiencing alternative approaches to problem-solving and family support. Her apology carried significance beyond immediate conflict resolution, indicating recognition that manipulation tactics and guilt-based appeals had been inappropriate strategies that damaged family relationships while preventing effective solution development. "I think I have been avoiding taking responsibility for my own choices because it felt easier to have family members rescue me from consequences," she continued, acknowledging patterns that had extended beyond current legal crisis to encompass broader approach to adult decision-making and accountability. The admission represented breakthrough in self-awareness that created foundation for healthier relationship dynamics and individual development that would benefit everyone involved in family system going forward. Wednesday brought lunch meeting with my Aunt Carmen, who wanted to discuss family developments while sharing her own perspectives on transformation that had occurred through boundary setting and objective problem-solving approaches that prioritized long-term well-being over immediate accommodation and conflict avoidance. "I am proud of how you handled this situation," Carmen began, her approval carrying weight of someone who had successfully maintained healthy boundaries within extended family while preserving loving relationships based on mutual respect rather than systematic accommodation. Her perspective provided validation from family member who understood both immediate challenges and long-term implications of different approaches to family support and individual development within complex relationship systems. "Your willingness to maintain boundaries while offering genuine help created space for Victoria to develop better decision-making skills," she observed, connecting individual boundary setting to collective family health and sustainable relationship patterns. The analysis demonstrated how personal authenticity and self-advocacy had produced benefits that extended beyond immediate conflict resolution, to encompass broader family transformation and healthier approaches to mutual support and individual accountability. Carmen shared stories from her own experience establishing boundaries with family members while maintaining loving relationships, providing examples of how authentic interaction could strengthen rather than damage family connections when approached with consistent commitment to both individual integrity and collective well-being. "The most loving thing you can do for family members sometimes is refusing to enable their poor choices while offering support for better approaches," she explained, reframing boundary setting as act of care rather than selfishness or family disloyalty. Her perspective provided framework for understanding how individual authenticity served collective interests by promoting personal responsibility and strategic problem-solving rather than crisis-driven resource allocation and accommodation patterns. Thursday afternoon brought surprise visit from David's mother, Patricia Chen, who had heard about recent family conflicts through David's updates and wanted to offer perspective from someone who had successfully navigated complex family dynamics while maintaining healthy boundaries and supportive relationships. Patricia had raised 3 children while managing successful accounting practice, balancing individual needs with family cooperation through approaches that emphasized mutual consideration and shared responsibility rather than systematic accommodation of whoever presented most immediate emotional crisis or financial demand. "David told me about the challenges you faced with your family regarding wedding funding," she began, her directness reflecting cultural values that prioritized honest communication over conflict avoidance and diplomatic maneuvering. Her approach provided contrast to my own family's tendency toward indirect manipulation and emotional appeals, demonstrating alternative methods for addressing conflicts through clear communication and strategic problem-solving, rather than guilt-based accommodation and boundary violations. In our family, we believe that keeping promises and honoring commitments demonstrates respect for everyone involved, Patricia continued, articulating values that aligned with my own instincts about integrity and relationship equity. Her perspective validated decision-making that prioritized promise-keeping and boundary maintenance, while offering framework for understanding how healthy families balance individual needs with collective support and mutual consideration. Patricia shared examples from her own family's approach to crisis management, describing situations where family members had faced genuine emergencies and received appropriate support without requiring other family members to sacrifice their important commitments or abandon their carefully developed plans. When my brother faced medical bankruptcy, we organized a family contribution system where everyone gave what they could afford without breaking existing promises or creating financial strain, she explained, providing concrete example of collaborative problem-solving that honored both individual boundaries and collective responsibility. The approach demonstrated how genuine family support could be provided through strategic coordination, rather than automatic sacrifice from family member perceived as most capable of handling disappointment or most responsive to emotional manipulation and guilt-based appeals. Friday brought phone call from Jennifer Walsh, providing update on Victoria's progress with alternative legal representation, and expressing professional satisfaction with families' willingness to address underlying problems rather than simply providing financial accommodation for inefficient approaches to legal representation. Victoria has selected new attorney who specializes in collaborative divorce resolution, and initial assessment suggests that her case can be resolved efficiently with fair outcome for both parties. Jennifer reported, confirming that professional guidance had produced strategic approach that served Victoria's actual interests rather than generating excessive billable hours. The development validated decision to seek objective assessment, while demonstrating how boundary setting had created space for genuine problem-solving that addressed root causes, rather than simply managing crisis symptoms through family financial intervention. Your family's willingness to examine underlying patterns and support better approaches rather than enabling poor choices has created opportunity for sustainable resolution, Jennifer observed, connecting individual boundary setting to broader family transformation and healthier relationship dynamics. Her professional perspective highlighted how personal authenticity and self-advocacy had generated benefits that extended beyond immediate conflict resolution to encompass family system health and individual development opportunities for everyone involved. Saturday morning brought family gathering at my parents' house, organized to celebrate resolution of Victoria's legal crisis and acknowledge transformation in family dynamics that had emerged through boundary setting and objective problem-solving approaches that prioritized long-term well-being over immediate accommodation. The atmosphere differed markedly from previous family meetings, characterized by genuine connection rather than tension and manipulation tactics, designed to generate guilt and immediate resource sacrifice from family members perceived as most capable of handling disappointment. Victoria appeared relaxed and confident, her demeanor reflecting relief at having competent legal representation while demonstrating newfound awareness about personal responsibility and strategic decision-making that would serve her throughout future challenges and opportunities. I wanted to thank everyone for supporting me through this difficult time while also helping me learn better approaches to handling problems. Victoria addressed the gathered family members, her gratitude encompassing both immediate assistance and boundary setting that had promoted personal growth. Her acknowledgement demonstrated maturation that had resulted from experiencing consequences while receiving appropriate support, validating family approaches that balanced individual accountability with collective care and mutual consideration. My father, who had initially resisted professional assessment and objective problem-solving, expressed newfound appreciation for strategic approaches that addressed root causes rather than simply managing crisis symptoms through automatic family accommodation and resource redirection. I realized that our previous approaches to family support may have prevented Victoria from developing skills she needed while creating unfair expectations for Emma, he admitted, acknowledging patterns that had shaped family dynamics for decades. His recognition represented significant progress in family awareness and accountability, creating foundation for healthier relationship patterns based on mutual respect and individual integrity rather than systematic accommodation and emotional manipulation. The gathering concluded with renewed commitment to family relationships based on authentic support and honest communication, rather than crisis-driven resource allocation and accommodation patterns that had served no one's long-term interests effectively. Sunday evening, as David and I reviewed wedding preparations that would proceed as originally planned with funding that had been promised and protected through boundary setting and family transformation, I reflected on unexpected alliance that had emerged through commitment to authenticity and personal integrity. The most surprising outcome of this entire situation has been how maintaining boundaries actually brought our family closer together, I observed, recognizing that authentic relationships had developed through honest communication rather than accommodation and conflict avoidance strategies. David nodded with understanding that came from witnessing transformation that had occurred through courage to assert personal worth and maintain commitments despite family pressure and emotional manipulation designed to generate automatic sacrifice. The unexpected alliance that had formed through truth-telling and boundary setting had created foundation for relationships based on mutual respect and individual dignity, rather than systematic accommodation patterns that had prevented authentic connection and healthy family development for decades. The resolution of Victoria's legal crisis had created an unexpected outcome that transformed not only family relationships but also the atmosphere surrounding wedding planning activities that had been overshadowed by manufactured emergency and resource allocation conflicts for several weeks. The $35,000 wedding fund remained intact and available for its intended purpose, while family dynamics had evolved toward healthier patterns of mutual support and individual accountability. Monday morning brought renewed enthusiasm for wedding preparations, as David and I recognized that external pressures had been resolved through strategic problem-solving rather than accommodation of poor decision-making patterns. The venue contracts, vendor agreements, and timeline commitments that had seemed vulnerable during family crisis were now secure and supported by relatives who understood the importance of honoring promises and celebrating significant life milestones appropriately. Our wedding planner, Sarah Martinez, had maintained professional discretion during family conflicts while expressing confidence that celebrations planned with careful attention to detail and meaningful personal touches would create lasting memories for couples and their extended networks. Her expertise had been particularly valuable during uncertain periods, when family pressure had threatened to derail 18 months of collaborative planning and creative visioning. Emma, I am delighted to continue working on your October celebration, Sarah confirmed during our Monday morning meeting at her downtown Seattle office. The vendor coordination and timeline management we established remains solid, and we can proceed with final details and creative enhancements that will make your day truly special. Her professional assessment provided foundation for renewed confidence in wedding planning processes, while acknowledging that external family dynamics had been successfully resolved through boundary setting and strategic problem-solving approaches that honored both individual needs and collective family health. The morning session focused on finalizing details that would transform the historic Fairmont Olympic Hotel ballroom into the elegant celebration space that David and I had envisioned during initial planning phases. The venue's architectural features provided sophisticated backdrop for ceremony and reception activities, while strategic lighting and floral arrangements would create intimate atmosphere within grand setting. Sarah presented updated proposals for enhanced photography packages that would capture both formal portraits and candid moments throughout the celebration, ensuring comprehensive documentation of family interactions and personal milestones that had gained additional significance through recent relationship transformation and authentic communication development. Given the positive family dynamics that have emerged recently, we might consider expanding photography coverage to include extended family gathering moments that will commemorate not only your marriage, but also the strengthened relationships that have developed through honest communication and mutual respect, Sarah suggested, recognizing opportunity to document family growth alongside matrimonial celebration. Her recommendation aligned with my own desire to acknowledge family transformation that had resulted from boundary setting and strategic problem solving, while celebrating matrimonial commitment that had provided foundation for personal growth and authentic relationship development throughout recent challenges. Tuesday afternoon brought shopping expedition with my mother and Aunt Carmen to select final accessories and personal details that would complete wedding attire, while creating shared experiences that reflected improved family relationships and mutual support for celebration planning and creative visioning processes. The bridal boutique appointment had been scheduled weeks earlier during more tense family circumstances, but the atmosphere had transformed dramatically as a result of honest communication and acknowledgement of problematic patterns that had affected family relationships and individual development for extended periods. Elena Rodriguez approached wedding shopping with enthusiasm that had been absent during crisis periods when family resources and attention had been redirected toward Victoria's legal expenses and manufactured emergency circumstances. Her engagement with accessories selection and personal styling demonstrated renewed investment in daughter's celebration and recognition of wedding significance within family milestone development. "Emma, I want this experience to be joyful and memorable for both of us," she said while examining veil options that would complement the classic silhouette of the dress I had selected months earlier. "I realize I allowed family conflicts to overshadow what should have been exciting planning time for your special day." Her acknowledgement carried weight of personal responsibility mixed with genuine desire to repair relationships and create positive experiences that would strengthen family bonds while celebrating individual achievements and relationship milestones that deserved recognition and support from extended network. Carmen's presence during shopping expedition provided additional perspective and emotional support, while demonstrating how healthy family relationships could enhance celebration planning through collaborative engagement and shared enthusiasm for important life transitions and matrimonial commitment ceremonies. "This pearl necklace would complement your dress beautifully while honoring family tradition," Carmen observed while examining jewelry options that would connect wedding attire to generational heritage and cultural values that had shaped family identity despite recent conflicts and relationship challenges. The afternoon concluded with selection of accessories that balanced personal preferences with family traditions, creating wedding attire ensemble that reflected both individual style and collective heritage within celebration framework that honored past relationships while establishing foundation for future family development and continued growth. Wednesday evening brought dinner gathering at David's family home, where Patricia and William Chen hosted celebration planning discussion that demonstrated alternative approaches to family support and wedding preparation involvement that emphasized collaboration rather than control or resource manipulation through emotional appeals. The Chen family's approach to wedding planning reflected cultural values that prioritized mutual respect and shared responsibility, while maintaining individual autonomy and decision-making authority for couples planning matrimonial celebrations and establishing new household formations within extended family structures. "We want to contribute to your celebration in ways that honor your preferences and enhance your vision, rather than imposing our own ideas or expectations," Patricia explained while reviewing catering options and reception planning details that would accommodate diverse dietary requirements and cultural preferences among anticipated guests. Her approach provided stark contrast to Rodriguez's family patterns that had historically involved emotional manipulation and resource demands designed to achieve predetermined outcomes, regardless of individual preferences or carefully developed plans and timeline commitments. William Chen shared perspectives on matrimonial celebrations that emphasized long-term relationship foundation building rather than expensive display or social status demonstration through elaborate spending and competitive resource allocation among family members and social networks. "The most important aspect of wedding celebration is creating meaningful experience that reflects your values and commitment while bringing together people who will support your marriage throughout future challenges and opportunities," he observed, articulating philosophy that aligned with David's and my own priorities for celebration planning and family relationship development. The evening concluded with Chen family commitment to specific contribution areas that would enhance celebration without creating dependency relationships or obligations that might compromise decision-making autonomy or create future family conflict through unclear expectations or boundary violations. Thursday morning brought appointment with enhanced photography team that would document wedding celebration with artistic sensibility and technical expertise that would create lasting visual record of family transformation and matrimonial milestone achievement within context of personal growth and authentic relationship development. Marcus Williams, the primary photographer, specialized in documentary-style wedding photography that captured genuine emotions and interpersonal dynamics rather than posed presentations that might obscure authentic relationship qualities and celebration significance within family and social contexts. Emma, I understand your family has experienced some growth and positive changes recently, Marcus acknowledged during portfolio review session. I would like to incorporate documentation of those strengthened relationships alongside traditional matrimonial photography to create comprehensive visual narrative of this important celebration. His approach recognized opportunity to document family transformation alongside wedding celebration, creating photographic record that would commemorate both matrimonial commitment and relationship development that had emerged through boundary setting and authentic communication practices. The expanded photography package included coverage of family preparation activities, ceremony proceedings, reception celebrations, and informal gathering moments that would capture relationship dynamics and emotional connections that had been strengthened through recent honest communication and mutual respect development. Marcus presented examples of previous wedding documentation that had captured family relationship evolution and personal growth within celebration contexts, demonstrating artistic ability to recognize and preserve authentic emotional moments that reflected genuine connection and mutual support among family members and extended networks. Friday afternoon brought final venue walkthrough with wedding planner Sarah Martinez and hotel events coordination team to confirm spatial arrangements and timeline logistics that would ensure smooth celebration execution while accommodating enhanced family participation and photography documentation requirements. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel ballroom had been transformed according to design specifications that balanced elegance with intimacy, creating atmosphere that would encourage genuine connection and celebration among guests, while providing sophisticated backdrop for ceremony and reception activities. The enhanced lighting design will create warmth that complements the architectural features while providing optimal conditions for both photography and guest comfort throughout celebration timeline. Sarah explained while reviewing technical preparations that would support comprehensive documentation and guest experience objectives. The spatial arrangements included designated areas for family gathering and informal conversation that would encourage relationship building and authentic interaction among guests who represented various aspects of David's and my social networks and professional communities. Hotel catering staff presented final menu selections that reflected cultural diversity and dietary accommodation requirements, while maintaining culinary excellence and presentation standards that would enhance celebration atmosphere and guest satisfaction throughout reception activities. Saturday brought bachelor and bachelorette celebration activities that had been designed to honor matrimonial transition while strengthening friendships and creating positive memories with social networks that would provide ongoing support for marriage relationship and future family development. My bachelorette celebration involved spa day activities with college friends and female relatives who had supported boundary-setting decisions and personal growth throughout recent family challenges and transformation processes. The relaxation and relationship building provided appropriate preparation for wedding celebration, while acknowledging importance of friendship networks and extended family support systems. Victoria participated in bachelorette activities with apparent genuine enthusiasm that reflected personal growth and relationship repair that had emerged through family transformation and authentic communication development during legal crisis resolution and boundary-setting experiences. Emma, I want you to know how grateful I am for your courage in maintaining boundaries that ultimately helped our entire family develop healthier relationship patterns. Victoria expressed during afternoon spa treatments that provided opportunity for private conversation and sisterly connection building. Her acknowledgement represented continued maturation and awareness that had resulted from experiencing appropriate consequences while receiving family support that promoted personal responsibility rather than enabling continued poor decision-making and accountability avoidance patterns. David's bachelor celebration involved recreational activities with male friends and relatives that emphasized relationship building and matrimonial preparation rather than escapist behavior that might undermine marriage commitment or create negative experiences before wedding celebration and matrimonial commitment ceremony. Sunday evening brought final family dinner gathering before wedding celebration, hosted by my parents at their home with attendance by extended family members who would participate in matrimonial ceremony and reception activities throughout upcoming celebration weekend. The atmosphere reflected family transformation that had emerged through recent boundary setting and authentic communication practices, characterized by genuine warmth and mutual support, rather than tension and conflict avoidance patterns that had historically dominated family gathering experiences. Robert Rodriguez addressed gathered family members with expression of pride and gratitude that acknowledged both wedding celebration significance and relationship growth that had developed through honest communication and strategic problem-solving approaches during recent crisis and transformation periods. I want to acknowledge Emma's wisdom and courage in maintaining boundaries that ultimately served our entire family's long-term health and individual development, he said, demonstrating awareness and accountability that had emerged through examining established patterns and their effects on family relationships and personal growth. His recognition represented significant evolution in family leadership and decision-making approaches that would support continued healthy relationship development and individual autonomy within collective family structure and mutual support systems. Elena Rodriguez expressed appreciation for wedding planning experiences that had been enhanced through improved family dynamics and collaborative engagement, rather than conflict and resource competition that had historically characterized family milestone celebration, preparation, and execution. The evening concluded with family blessing and commitment ceremony that acknowledged matrimonial celebration significance, while recognizing family transformation that had created foundation for continued relationship growth and authentic connection development among all family members. As David and I returned to our apartment that evening, the wedding planning renaissance that had emerged through family transformation provided foundation for celebration that would honor both matrimonial commitment and personal growth that had resulted from courage to maintain boundaries and pursue authentic relationships despite external pressure and emotional manipulation attempts. The journey toward wedding celebration had evolved far beyond venue selection and vendor coordination to encompass fundamental transformation in family relationships and personal identity development that would provide foundation for marriage success and continued individual growth within supportive extended family network. The October morning of my wedding dawned with crystalline clarity that seemed to mirror the transformation my family and I had undergone throughout the preceding months. Seattle's notorious autumn weather had granted us an unexpected gift of brilliant sunshine streaming through the windows of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel bridal suite, where I prepared for the celebration that had become far more significant than a matrimonial ceremony. This day represented the culmination of a journey toward authentic relationships and personal integrity that had begun with my decision to protect the wedding fund against family pressure and manufactured crisis. Victoria arrived at the bridal suite at 7:30 in the morning, carrying fresh coffee and genuine enthusiasm that reflected the personal growth she had achieved through accepting responsibility for her legal situation and developing healthier approaches to family relationships and individual accountability. Her presence in my preparation space represented healing that had emerged through honest communication and boundary setting, rather than accommodation and enabling patterns that had historically characterized our sisterly interactions. "Emma, I brought your favorite lavender scones from that bakery near Pike Place Market," she announced while arranging breakfast offerings on the suite's elegant table. "I wanted to start your wedding day with something special that acknowledges how proud I am of your courage throughout these past months." Her gesture carried significance beyond simple breakfast provision, demonstrating recognition that my boundary-setting decisions had ultimately served everyone's long-term interests while creating foundation for authentic family relationships based on mutual respect rather than systematic accommodation and emotional manipulation tactics. The morning preparation activities included participation from extended family members who had witnessed relationship transformation and personal growth that had resulted from strategic problem-solving and individual accountability development during crisis periods. Aunt Carmen contributed professional hairstyling expertise while sharing observations about family dynamics evolution that had strengthened collective health and individual well-being. This celebration feels completely different from other family gatherings we have experienced recently, Carmen noted while arranging pearl accessories that connected wedding attire to generational heritage and cultural traditions. The atmosphere reflects genuine connection and mutual support rather than tension and conflict avoidance patterns that had characterized previous milestone events. Her assessment acknowledged fundamental changes in family interaction patterns that had emerged through commitment to authenticity and strategic problem-solving rather than crisis-driven resource allocation and accommodation of poor decision-making behaviors that had historically prevented healthy relationship development. Elena Rodriguez participated in mourning preparation with emotional investment and collaborative enthusiasm that had been absent during family conflicts when attention and resources had been redirected toward Victoria's legal expenses and manufactured emergency circumstances that had threatened wedding planning activities and celebration timeline. "Mija, you look absolutely radiant," she observed while helping arrange veil placement and final attire adjustments. "But more importantly, you carry yourself with confidence and strength that emerged through maintaining boundaries and pursuing authentic relationships despite external pressure and family manipulation attempts." Quote, "Her recognition encompassed both physical appearance and personal development that had resulted from courage to prioritize individual integrity over family harmony maintenance and automatic accommodation of problematic behavioral patterns that had affected everyone's growth and relationship satisfaction." The photographer Marcus Williams documented preparation activities with artistic sensibility that captured relationship dynamics and emotional connections that had been strengthened through recent honest communication and strategic conflict resolution approaches. His presence created comprehensive visual record of family transformation alongside matrimonial milestone achievement. "The light in this suite is extraordinary today. But even more remarkable is the genuine warmth and connection I observe among family members," Marcus commented while capturing candid moments of collaborative preparation and authentic interaction. "These images will commemorate not only your wedding celebration, but also the relationship growth that provides foundation for marriage success." His professional perspective validated family transformation, while recognizing opportunity to document personal development and collective healing that had emerged through individual boundary setting and strategic problem-solving during challenging periods that had tested relationship strength and individual resolve. 10 o'clock brought arrival of David's immediate family members, who contributed calm professionalism and cultural perspectives that balanced Rodriguez's family dynamics, while demonstrating alternative approaches to celebration participation and matrimonial milestone recognition that emphasized collaboration rather than control or emotional manipulation. Patricia Chen approached mourning preparation with practical assistance and emotional support that reflected healthy family relationship patterns based on mutual consideration and individual autonomy, rather than systematic accommodation or resource manipulation, through guilt-based appeals and manufactured urgency creation. "Emma, we are honored to welcome you into our family and celebrate this marriage that represents commitment to authentic partnership and shared values," she expressed while contributing final preparation assistance and collaborative support for celebration execution. Her acknowledgement encompassed both matrimonial significance and personal qualities that had been demonstrated through recent family challenges and boundary-setting experiences that had revealed character strength and integrity commitment, despite external pressure and emotional manipulation attempts. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.